On behalf of the Conference Organizing Committee of SASPEN, I welcome you to the 8th International Annual SASPEN Conference. My name is Susan Mlewa, the Network Coordinator of SASPEN. 3 to 5 years ago, never would I have imagined that we would be hosting a hybrid conference that would accommodate both virtual and physical participants from the region and beyond. This is not to say it is not a possibility, but this is because, as you all know, the International Annual Conference provides a once-in-a-year opportunity for experts in the region to network and engage. However, because we're living in hard times, we had to look around how we can move forward to ensure that we continue working and networking and promoting the social protection agenda. Therefore, we looked at workable solutions or alternatives on how we could move forward to ensure this is happening. And of course, because the trend these days is virtual conferences or hybrid conferences, we jumped on the bandwagon and we had to make a difficult decision to have a hybrid conference this year. Therefore, this year's conference, we'll be looking at social protection and social services and how they link with one another. And it comes at an opportune time because we are still living in hard times of COVID-19. And also there has been a lot of work around the pandemic in relation to social protection. This is inclusive of responses at national level by the different governments in the region, as well as research that has been happening around the responses, as well as research that has been happening around looking at the gaps that exist in responses, looking at the state of social protection and how we can make informed recommendations for policy around this. Also, it provides an opportunity for us to look at alternatives. This is in relation to moving away from the traditional approaches of responding or providing the provisions of social protection to out-of-the-box solutions that we in the past possibly thought could not be considered. But the pandemic has shown that social protection needs to be designed in ways that are responsive to our needs, our contextual needs, as well as responses that need to be inclusive and comprehensive. Therefore, we believe that this conference will provide an opportunity for us to engage in sharing lessons, experiences at regional level and beyond, and seeing how we can establish the link between social protection and social services. Establishing this link and also identifying the gaps that exist will help inform recommendations moving forward to ensure that we build systems that are responsive to future pandemics and are inclusive of all groups, as well as comprehensive and sustainable. So we have lined up an engaging program for the next 2 days that will be breaking down the theme into universal health coverage, as well as youth and unemployment, and also looking at marginalized groups, which include women, youth, and children. And most importantly, we will finalize discussions by looking at a very important aspect of social protection programming. And this is legal and financial frameworks that inform the feasibility and sustainability of social protection programs. I wish you an engaging 2 days and trust that you will participate throughout the plenary and discussions and question and answer sessions. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Could we ask the panelists for the first for the opening session to come up, please? I know Mr. Ngosa Chisupa is online, and I assume that he's available. But Mr. Gilbert Knies of the FAS, if you could come up, please, and also Mr. Linton Mchunu, the Acting Director General of Department of Social Development. Please take your seat.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chisupa. Welcome here. Glad you're with us. Just give us a moment. We'll start in a minute or so. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, to all our physical delegates as well as our virtual delegates. And I know that some people will still be joining us, but we rather start with our program because we have a full day. Welcome to this annual International Conference of SASPEN. It's literally more than 2 years ago that we were able last time to gather together. So to a certain extent, that is a historical experience again. And not just for us, I'm told by the hotel, it's the very first time since COVID-19 struck that they are having a conference. So we are making history today for the hotel. They also make history today. I welcome you all on behalf of SASPEN. My name is Marius Olivier. I'm the Chairperson of the Board of Trustees or the Board of Guarantors of SASPEN. I'll introduce our other speakers and the other board director as well within a moment. As I've said, this is a historic moment. Susan already explained to you in the video what this conference is all about, the all-important theme on social protection, social services in the SADC region, Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030, and beyond actually as well. We have a full program. We'll talk about the program a little bit later. If I have to extend further our welcome, then let me in particular welcome also here in the panel, the representative of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, kindly supporting this conference, and also SASPEN, Mr. Gilbert Knies, who is standing in for the resident representative, Mr. Fritz Kopsika, who is on leave. Then also to the Department of Social Development, the Acting Director General, Mr. Linton Mchunu, and then also other colleagues from the department who have kindly joined us for today, Mr. Brenton van Vrede, the Chief Director Social Assistance, Mr. Anthony Makwarimiti, Chief Director Social Insurance, Mr. Rajesh Lachwayu, Chief Director Partnership and Innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have colleagues from all over the SADC region, many of whom are joining us virtually. We have a very strong secretariat, and we have others who have joined us for this. We have international guests as well. In fact, the first keynote speaker after the opening session is somebody who's very well known to all of us and who couldn't join us this year physically, but at least virtually, she'll be speaking to us, Ms. Renata Nowak-Gamer of the UNDP, the regional office in Addis Ababa, regional office for Africa. Before we commence with the program, allow me just to make a few announcements that we really need to take heed of. So in the first place, delegates will have their lunch here at the Southern Sun, whereas dinners will be served from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at a sister hotel of this 154 on Bath. And those of you who don't know where it is, just ask any of the SASPEN Secretariat people to show you the way. It is actually just about 3-4 minutes walk. Delegates online, please ensure that you keep your cameras off and your mic muted during sessions. This is done to limit disturbances and spare the bandwidth in transmissions, allowing you to have the best virtual experience. When we have the question and answer sessions, we will ask our virtual delegates to use the raise your hand function to pose a question live. Alternatively, to use the chat box to place your questions. Session chairs take note of questions in the chat box, most importantly, please. The delegates attending physically, please assist us to comply with all of the COVID-19 protocols, which I'm going to discuss with you now. Do cooperate when you are asked to be screened. If you are screened and your temperature is above 37.2 degrees, we'll ask you to wait outside to retake your temperature. If your temperature remains above the accepted normal rate, you'll be asked to isolate in your room and follow the sessions virtually. If you are asked to isolate, we will monitor your symptoms and assist you further if necessary. Mr. Chanda Chungu, where are you? Could you just stand up? Please look carefully at Mr. Chanda Chungu, the man in the white shirt. He is the event's designated COVID-19 protocol officer. And if you have any questions, please direct them to him for assistance. You are asked that you keep your mask on while you are in the room, except when you speak or drink water. Please respect others' personal space and keep your social distancing. When we have questions and answer sessions, you will be asked to move towards mics there are two mics here, two roving mics, as you can see, and pose questions from there. The mics will be sanitized before the next person poses a question. There will be COVID-19 testing facilities available for all delegates who require negative test certificates for travel purposes when you go back. This will be done from 3:30 to 4:30. Please talk to the Secretariat colleagues whom we are going to introduce soon. Participants will be guided from the conference room when it is their time to test. Note that they are required to cover your test financially, it means. Once the session has started, you are directed to use only the back exit and entrance doors as to prevent unnecessary disturbance. Please be punctual and on time, as we need to allow the coordination of the event between physical and virtual to be as seamless as possible. And since we have lost a few minutes already. There are conference assistants and members of the conference secretariat stationed in strategic points wearing SASPEN branded blue t-shirts, if I could add. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. Now, some of them are in the room. Can you just stand up or remain standing where you are, that we can all see who they are and how they look? You can see the blue shirts with the white inscription. So these are the people who can show you the way. Thank you for your understanding and enjoy the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you to ask our three speakers in the panel session to come up and extend a word of welcome on behalf of their respective institutions. And we have in the first place Ms. Ngosa Chisupa, who is the Board of Directors person of SASPEN. Mr. Chisupa, you are online, I believe. Can you hear us?
Yes, good morning. Yes, I am online, and thank you very much. Do I go ahead and make my statement? Thank you very much.
Please do so.
Thank you very much, Director of Programs, Professor Marius Olivier. On behalf of the Southern African Social Protection Experts Network Board of Directors, I take great pleasure in welcoming you all to the 8th International Annual SASPEN Conference on Social Protection. This year's International Annual Social Protection Conference comes at a very opportune time, not only to reflect on social protection provisions in mitigating negative socio-economic consequences of COVID-19, but to also present the first strategic plan in the history of SASPEN that was crafted in the wake of the global pandemic. The strategic plan covers the period 2021 to 2025, setting out a blueprint for action that will take place in this critical time in history when the world has been forced to rethink current social protection provisions. I therefore note with confidence that the conference program has been structured to learn from the resilience of the traditional social protection system, but to also look into the alternatives for the provision of responsive, inclusive, and comprehensive social protection. And this pandemic has shown us that long-established policy settings and institutional arrangements can be modified in ways that were previously unimaginable by reallocating resources, differently reassess social priorities, and identifying innovative approaches in cushioning future risks and shocks. Allow me to commend the conference organizing committee chaired by Professor Marius Olivier and the SASPEN Secretariat headed by Susan Mlewa for organizing this conference, the speakers for the submissions that will inform the anticipated constructive engagement of the conference, and the overall partnership of the Frederick Ebert Stiftung for making this conference possible in these times of great uncertainty. We therefore look forward that this conference, I think, will be very beneficial in progressing our individual and institutional aspirations towards the Africa we want. Thank you very much, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chisupa, who joined us from virtually from Zambia. Mr. Knies from the FAS, Frederick Ebert Foundation, Zambia, please.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you, Marius, and thank you, Mr. Chisupa. I would like to welcome you all to the 2021 SASPEN International Annual Conference. We're looking in these 2 days at social protection and social services in the SADC region, and also looking at Agenda 2063 and 2030. My name is Gilbert Knies, and I'm speaking today instead of Mr. Fritz Kopsieger for the FAS Zambia. I'd like to welcome our partner SASPEN, their structures, and also their members, their helping hands. I'd like to welcome our speakers and resource persons, and also the colleagues from the FAS South Africa, Uta Dieksen and her colleague Mbuzo Moyo. And it's also a great honor to welcome the Department of Social Development of South Africa with the Acting Director General, Mr. Linton Mchunu, and his colleagues, as I've just heard. You also find a short message of the FAS Zambia in the program. Let me just briefly say, the fact that we can meet here today partly in person is, as we know, partly lucky and to a lot not very lucky. The global pandemic is the reason for that, and this one just reminded us of the weaknesses of our social protection schemes. We, the FAS, are the German Foundation for Social Democracy. We try to work in order to achieve freedom and justice for all, and we do that through the idea of solidarity. That's just like the idea how social protection should work. And we think that's the best possible solution to reducing harm in the future. This conference is looking at possible linkages of social protection and social services, not only to reduce poverty and vulnerability, but also to look for possibilities to sustaining peace and promoting prosperity for all. It's now a pleasure for me to look forward to 2 days of intense exchange and of experiences and insights with colleagues from the region. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to Mr. Knies. Mr. Linton Mchunu, the Acting Director General of the Department of Social Development, ladies and gentlemen, one of our crucial ministries or departments in this country, especially in the area, of course, of social protection. So it's our privilege to invite Mr. Mchunu to introduce not just himself in the department, but also to say a few welcome words. Mr. Mchunu, please. Thank you.
Program Director, can I take my mask off? Is it fine? It's just that it's good to be around people again, you know. We've been locked up in the literal sense for such a long time. it's so different, to be back in conference with everybody. And I'm glad that you are able to have this engagement in a hybrid manner. I bring greetings from the Department of Social Development here in the Republic of South Africa. Prior to this engagement, I had a conversation with my minister just a few minutes ago and said to her that we would be talking about social protection and social services within the SADC region. And she reminded me about how she worked in different African countries, including during the struggle. They focused a lot on the well-being of people within the continent. And she says, she would like to get the outcomes of this conference so she could engage also with some of her colleagues, particularly within the region, by way of seeing how other countries are engaging and moving towards the protection or the well-being rather of its citizens. So we have a very keen interest in this program, as you would know, as the Department of Social Development. So we're very glad that we've been invited to be part of this engagement. Program Director, SASPEN Board of Trustees, Chairperson, Professor Oliver, SASPEN Board of Directors, Chairperson, Mr. Chisupa, Frederick Ebert. Can I just say FES? It's easier. It's difficult to pronounce the name. Zambia resident representative, Mr. Gilbert Knies, Ms. Renata Gama, Nowak Gama rather, the United Nations Development Program from Ethiopia, representatives from UN agencies who may be joining us this morning, government colleagues, and representatives from civil society organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Thank you for the invitation to join the 8th International Annual Southern African Social Protection Experts Network, SASPEN Conference, being held here in Johannesburg in South Africa. We're indeed delighted to host everybody in the City of Gold. And I like to refer to it as the city where God lives. I believe that he visits other cities, but he resides here in Johannesburg. So those physically here, I'm sure that you'll enjoy the hospitality that we have to offer, especially since we are gradually opening up with COVID-19, of course, still upon us, and those connecting virtually. I also trust that you will be able to actively participate and engage in the sessions that we have that have been prepared between today and tomorrow. As the Department of Social Development responsible for social protection measures in the Republic, we take seriously the matters discussed at this conference, and we certainly look forward to the outcomes thereof. Program Director, we're meeting under the theme Social Protection and Social Services in the SADC region, Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. This year's conference brings us together to exchange and discuss social protection and social services in the Southern African Development Community region in the wider context of Agenda 2030 as well as Agenda 2063, which is Africa's blueprint for socio-economic development. Additionally, focus will be on cash transfers, youth employment services, access to social services to women and marginalized groups as well as legal, financial, and institutional frameworks. And I'm sure that within the region, we are all feeling the pain of the high levels of unemployment, particularly for young people, and the challenges that has caused, within our various countries, particularly with regards to economic growth. I read a very interesting article the other day. I won't say who wrote it, but you can find it online. They make an analysis around men heads of state and female heads of state in terms of how they handle the pandemic. And they say that men heads of state chose to focus on the economy in terms of how they determined to open up their various countries. And female heads of state tended to focus more on the well-being of their citizens when they made the decisions in terms of the various lockdowns, etc. I thought it was an interesting analysis to determine, the difference in terms of how men take decisions in leadership and how women take decisions in leadership. And I think it's quite an interesting analysis. We have witnessed the ravaging impact of COVID-19 pandemic. This conference as a platform for us, serves rather as a platform for us to reflect on the role of social protection and social services. Many countries in the region initiated necessary measures to save lives and livelihoods. Considering the impact of the pandemic on individuals, households, and communities, there's been a remarkable demand for services for vulnerable groups. As part of our deliberations, we do need to share best practices on how some of the interventions can be sustained into the future. Without any doubt, there is definitely a need for us to accelerate efforts to achieve the targets set for Agenda 2030 as well as Agenda 2063. We have to improve access to social protection and basic services, social services, especially for poor and vulnerable households and individuals. Program Director, governments cannot do this alone. Despite country-specific circumstances, it is important to acknowledge that the state and non-state actors are critical for the provision of social services. We need to uphold the importance of partnerships at all levels, domestically, regionally, as well as internationally. To this end, we look forward to this engagement as delegates explore the social protection and social services provided in different SADC countries and how these are intrinsically linked. As a reminder, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development made commitments amongst others to end poverty and hunger everywhere, combat inequalities within and amongst countries, to build peaceful, just and inclusive societies, to protect human rights and promote gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, to create conditions for sustainable, inclusive, and sustained economic growth, shared prosperity, and decent work for all, taking into consideration different levels of national development and capacities. Sustainable Development Goal 1.3 on comprehensive social protection systems, focus on coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. 3.8 on universal health coverage and access to quality health care services. 4.5 on elimination of gender disparities on education and improve access to education. And 8.6 on reducing the proportion of youth not employed, education, or trained are key to reflect on during the engagements of this conference. South Africa's National Development Plan, Vision 2030, was adopted in 2012 as a blueprint and roadmap for socioeconomic development. Although it predates the 2030 development agenda of the United Nations for Sustainable Development, as well as the African Union's Agenda 2063, the National Development Plan aligns very well with the Sustainable Development Goals, including Agenda 2063. The NDP, our National Development Plan's vision, prioritizes job creation, the elimination of poverty, the reduction of inequality, creating and adequate standards of living for everyone, and growing an inclusive economy by 2030. We refer to this as the triple challenges. Agenda 2063, the Africa we want as a continental blueprint, also directs member states to move towards achieving inclusive and sustainable development. I quote an aspect of this, says, Africa is expected to show improved standards of living, transformed, inclusive, and sustained economies, increased levels of regional and continental integration, a population of empowered women and youth, and a society in which children are cared for and protected. Societies that are peaceful, demonstrate good democratic values, and practice good governance principles, and which preserve and enhance Africa's cultural identity. There are significant similarities in the priorities in Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063, as well as our own National Development Plan as South Africa. Key cross-cutting issues which relate to the quality of life and well-being of all include the focus on hunger, poverty, inequality, social security, social protection, and social services. Ladies and gentlemen, there are there are at least 9 years for us to reach the year 2030. Similarly, Agenda 2063 may appear to be far, but we must remember that each day draws us closer to these years. We must therefore use this conference as a platform to reflect on what our respective countries as a region have achieved to date, and what more we are yet to achieve within the remaining years. It is important to reflect on these challenges, on the challenges that must be addressed for us to make huge strides in our efforts to achieve these targets, especially in areas where we are not doing well. Program Director, Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063 will not be achieved if we take a business as usual approach. The COVID-19 pandemic has caught many countries across the world off guard and has been an unpleasant wake-up call for many of us. Many had to develop new systems from scratch to be able to urgently help their citizens. But this was not all bad. Many countries, for many countries, the COVID-19 pandemic helped propel the development of social protection measures. And just before I close, I'd like to take the opportunity to briefly share with you one or two social protection and social services that we have provided to vulnerable individuals in South Africa, households, and communities since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, and some of which we are actually still continuing. The South African government, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, released a socio-economic recovery stimulus package worth around 500 billion rands in 2020. In terms of our social assistance grants program, we implemented a top-up for all existing grants, and this is to about 18 million South Africans, grant recipients in the country. We topped that up for about 6 months to try and assist people through the pandemic. Additionally, we started a special COVID-19 social relief of distress grant, which has since become known as the 350 grant. Nowadays, they call us Mr. and Mrs. 350 because we provide grants, new grants to assist those who have been unemployed for a long time. And we've implemented this grant to provide those in distress, particularly the unemployed working adults and special permit holders from Zimbabwe, Lesotho, and Angola, as well as asylum seekers. And we've actively made that available to those asylum seekers in our country. To date, more than 6 million individuals, this is in addition to the 18 million grants that we already pay as a country, who have not previously been able to access social assistance, have benefited from this intervention. In the current year, as we now expanded this benefit to caregivers, which is an important aspect, we're looking at about an additional 7 million caregivers, in addition to to the 6 million that we provided, who receive child benefits. We're now expected to provide just over 9 million, and I think we're sitting at close to 10 million already, which has surpassed the target that we had set for ourselves to qualify for these benefits. And President has since extended this particular grant until the end of March 2022. For our social service interventions, a number of initiatives were rolled out. For instance, for children, we worked with drop-in center facilities as delivery mechanisms for services to vulnerable children within their communities. Such children include, chronically and or terminally ill children, orphaned children, children who have a disability or are living with a chronic illness, children affected with HIV and AIDS, children in child-headed homes, children living and working on the streets, children who are abused, neglected, and exploited, and children who are abandoned. We have a program that we used to call Isibindi. We've now changed the name to Resiha, and it focuses largely on child-headed households and the support that we're able to provide to them. What I think is fascinating about this program is that other African countries, including Kenya, have now come to us and says, we think that this program is significant, and we think that we may want to take some aspects of this program and utilize it in Kenya. In fact, we also had USAID, I think it was, USAID, I think it was, to also look at how we are implementing this program, because they think that it could assist them on the border of Mexico and the USA in terms of the approach that we have put forward with regards to the program. So there's some aspect of sharing of best practices. I just think that in some aspects, we need to just do a little bit more in that regard. With regards to older persons, Chairperson, we provided training for opening of community-based care and support services due to the vulnerability of older persons. In terms of substance abuse issues, our department also continues to provide psychosocial support services to deal with trauma of COVID-19, gender-based violence and crime, gender-based violence and femicide and crime. Additionally, shelters for victims of gender-based violence and crime and femicide and crime were kept open during the pandemic. Due to the hardships, though, there was an increase in the demand for our services. For food security and nutrition, the feeding of homeless persons accommodated in, we accommodated rather homeless persons in shelters. And this was an urgent matter that we needed to do. As you know, that when we were on adjusted alert level 5, you are not allowed to be on the street, save for going to get medication and food. And so we needed to reach out to even homeless persons, and we've done so. We partnered with service providers to provide a relief package. Due to the lockdown measures, many households were affected, and due to closure of community nutrition and development centers, distribution of food parcels was adopted as a short-term relief measure in the provinces. So instead of people coming to collect food at our centers, we did drop-off services where we went to drop off food at various households. The department provided food to over 11.6 million people across the Republic in partnership with civil society organizations, the clergy, business and communities. Chair, as I conclude, considering the diversity and expertise in this conference, including academics, researchers, civil society, policymakers from various governments, I'm very confident that the outcomes will be achieved across the region. As we look at Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063, we must strengthen our knowledge base for the design of comprehensive and responsive social protection interventions and programs, which include social services. We must enhance cooperation on social protection and social services as essential components for socio-economic development in line with the Sustainable Development Agenda. We must engage on policy, legal, institutional, and operational frameworks in relation to social protection and social services in particular. We must also share best practices with our neighboring countries to ensure that we protect social protection measures and services, not only for our individual countries, but indeed within our region as well. I want to remind you of a quote that former President Mbeki made at one of the AU summits, and he says, "None of us as African countries can afford to be islands of prosperity in a sea of poverty." And the well-being of those around us matters. And the well-being of those within our respective countries, including those in our surrounding countries, matters. And we must, as a matter of principle, engage to ensure that we improve the well-being that we advance and improve the well-being of all citizens of the SADC region and even on the continent. The success of society is intrinsically linked to the well-being of each and every citizen. And therefore, we have a responsibility, and as I indicated, not just as governments, but inclusive of other players, stakeholders, including civil society, business, to ensure that we provide this support to ensure that, to all our citizens, and ensure that we're able to unlock their potential through the interventions that we provide and ensure that we're able to advance their lives in a much better way. So thank you very much, and welcome once again to this important conference. Thank you.
Our sincere thanks to the acting DG, Ms. Mchunu, for these very important, very welcome, very instructive introductory remarks. For those of you who don't know, the Department of Social Development for us who have been working in this area for a number of years, if we think back of the pre-94 and the post-1994 period, there's no comparison actually. The work that has been done, especially since 94, to extend these